Geeky. Good morning, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and thank you for joining me here at McDuff Lives for a kind of a special edition. I don't usually do a Mind Fields on Tuesday mornings, but it's I felt last night that I didn't really get all of my point across very well, and I thought, geez, why not just jump on to this morning and see if we can't finish up what I was trying to accomplish last night in Mindfields number 149. So here we are at Mindfields number 150, and it's the 21st day of December, which means it is the shortest day, the longest night, the solstice. And we are passing into winter now on the official calendar, and that gives Joe Biden the opportunity to fulfill his promise that if we did not get jabbed, he will make sure that we don't survive the winter. And we're going to fill up the hospitals with our mealy old bodies that are going to be ravaged with a horrific disease that has killed millions and millions of people. And we're so stupid that we're not taking the jab. So we're gonna die, Morituri te salutamus. In other words, FJB. That's what I say. And this is why I'm angry, because of this fraud. Um, the fraud, and I'm not even sure I know exactly what the fraud is, except for that it's a fraud. And I'm not even going to try to to state any words that identify it. But what could it be? What is the plan? Good morning, Tyrone. Glad to have you, buddy. Kathy, Sue, Tivo, Ezra, Deborah, David's here. Jay Egarde is here. And well, that's a good crowd for short notice. I apologize for the short notice, but again, it's my minefields, and my mind was buzzing last night thinking I didn't quite seal the deal last night. I want to finish it up. Hello, uh, hello, Montreal. Oh boy, I don't know how to say your first name in French. That would Hugues, Hugues. Oh, oh, oh my. I'm sorry. Sometimes I try to speak French, but it's impossible. You guys have the most complicated and difficult language ever invented. That's what I say. But okay, I try, I persevere, but I don't think I can say your first name without making you laugh. Hey, Fawn, thank you. Tom. I don't know. I haven't run into that name before. Iggy, Iggy, Iggy. I'm sorry. I can't help but try. There's something wrong with me. My brain doesn't work like normal people. I should be ashamed. Oh well. Oh, sip of coffee and then we'll get started. So this is part of what I played last night, but it goes on a little bit longer, and I for the full impact, I want to start where I am here. It's just a very short little clip, which I will share with you. Let's see, not that one. Yeah, share screen. Here we go. All right. So you remember this from last night, right? The first few minutes of it was building up from the Big Bang, the Big Bang, and the billions of years go by, and then suddenly something amazing happens. That's the beginning of life. And this gentleman, Detlev Ganter, got Ganten, Ganten, sorry. This doctor is the head of the biggest hospital and the most important hospital in Germany called the Charité. Yeah. So here we go. Just a very quick clip. I want you to listen to it.
And the first life was not man, was RNA viruses. So viruses very similar to the one we are discussing now, like the coronavirus. And then again, it took some time before Homo sapiens came to life and then populated the world.
Okay, there it is. Life began with the coronavirus. We know that now because why would the dean of the most important hospital in Germany, where Christian Drosten is the director of virology, the head of the virology department, and the man who adapted the PCR to become a test for a disease which the inventor of the PCR said you can't use to test for disease. But he said, "Oh, I can modify it. Now that I know about Snohomish County man, I can tell just from the little bit that I've heard that this is a brand new novel coronavirus." And he worked for the man that just identified the coronavirus as the basic building block of life. Isn't that crazy? I don't know if it raises to the level of fraud because it may just refer to a level of ignorance that hasn't been surpassed since Walt Disney's productions in the 50s. It's an incredibly unscientific thing to say because there's no literature, none, zero. I would bet you can't find any that says that the coronavirus was the basic building block of life, that somehow that began the whole cascade of, genes and cells and microbes and organisms and lions and tigers and bears and humans. And so why does he say something so crazy like that? Number one, because he thinks that we're all stupid and we'll just believe it, which unfortunately a lot of us are, and we do. But the sheer gall of from his pedestal, that if there's ever an ivory tower in the world, heading one of the most important university hospitals in the world, has got to be an ivory tower. And he spits this crap down at us from the ivory tower. Said, "Hey, it's all about coronavirus. That's all life is." When just a whole bunch of coronaviruses getting together. So, all right. I don't want to beat that too bad, but what I want to do now is to go to an article I was reading last night, which I want to explore in more depth. This is called The Role of Darwinism in Nazi Racial Thought. And once again, this is kind of takes a little bit of attention. So I'm trying not to repeat what I did last night, but I'm going to try to get into some more depth than I did last night in this article. It is published in German Studies Review 2013, volume 36. So we know that Hitler was a social Darwinist, and we know from what we read last night that he believed in the different races, different human races were developed and they evolved. It is an evolution. It's not a sudden appearance, as if a god had suddenly deposited these intact human races on the earth. Okay, it's evolution, but evolution produced different qualities of humanity depending upon the environment. And we've heard it said last night, and I'll say it again, that the Nazi idea is that the Aryan race, also known as the Nordic race, became superior because it had to fight so hard. It struggled for existence. Um, it's Existenzkampf, like Mein Kampf. The struggle is very much important to the Nazi idea of life. Nazis believed that they belonged to the Aryan race and that there were other races uh, that were inferior. And the reason that they're inferior is they didn't learn how to be tough, how to work hard, how to have a strong work ethic, and how to fight against all impediments, especially, you know, we come from the land of the ice and snow, where the cold winds and the cold winds blow. Yeah, those guys, the Aryans, they're the strong ones, and they're the ones that, according to Darwinism, should be the fittest. That should be the survivors, the survival of the fittest. But not only that, um, the Nazis had the idea that it's not good enough just to avoid reproducing with inferior races and to get rid of those inferior races if they're in your way or if they're irritating you, such as the Jews in the European cities, um, or the Poles and the Eastern Europeans that were in the way of the Nazis' need for more room to create more plantations where the serfs could work until they dropped dead in their early 30s, I guess. If you take any time at all to study the Eastern Front in World War II, you will see that by and large the Nazis had lost their entire empathy for other people. It was gone. And that's what concerns me about our present situation. Have people like uh, Detlev Ganton, Christian Dross, um, Axel Priest, Pries, who is, I think, currently the president of the World Health Summit. Have they lost their empathy? They don't understand. And how did that happen? Are they still immersed in the Nazi race theories in an unconscious or subconscious way? So that even though into World War II, eugenics no longer is a goal of Western societies, and the Harrimans and the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies no longer a goal? Well, no. As we know, they've changed their tactics and changed the words, but the goal is still there. And why is the goal still there? Well, much of our analysis has been of the banking. We're saying, well, the banks have overextended themselves so many times with this fractional reserve lending that they now have got paper out there that is impossible that could ever cash in all of the notes and promissory notes and the bills of credit and all of the different swaps and derivatives and everything. They're all far beyond any possibility of ever being redeemed for actual worth, for actual value. If everybody had a piece of paper demanded to be paid in cash or some real money, Shouldn't say cash because that's just currency. But if you were to demand that you get something of value for your paper, there's no way. There's hundreds of trillions of dollars of paper floating around out there, trillions of actual U.S. Treasury Reserve, Federal Reserve notes out there, and it's all chasing smaller and smaller, or it is all chasing the same pieces of the pie that exist, but each time they print more paper, each piece of paper represents a tinier and tinier piece of the pie, representing real money or real assets. How can they do it? How can they do something that obviously is going to cause people to starve, to freeze, to lose their families, to have to migrate, to just destroy cultures, communities, lives, both persons and entire families and uh, entire countries, like Vietnam, for instance. And that's an Ed Lansdale production under Alan Dulles, where they set out to destroy the culture, and they don't care about the people. Isn't that a reflection of the same Nazi idea that, hey, we are the superior race and we need to get rid of the ones that are just taking up space? You know, doing this stupid old village culture thing. We're sure that the old people, they live to a ripe old age, and sure the people who are sick have a family to stick to, and old people teach the young people, and the children learn their morals at home, and the children grow up, feeling appreciated and loved. But no, it's much better to get rid of all of that and turn us all into individual serfs, like Lego pieces, like pieces of a Lego puzzle. I think I'd like to build a new society, so I'd get me a box of Legos, and that box of Legos is represented by over history, either atoms or carbon or germplasm or a quark. Well, the unit of life that has been designated by the Charité Hospital is simply a virus, a coronavirus, something that is not even alive unless it can get into a cell and replicate. So I don't know how anybody could think that the coronavirus is the beginning of life unless you are supremely deluded, which is not possible if you're the president and dean of a major teaching institution where you have access to all of the information you could possibly need to correct what is a stupid thing to say. Now, where does all this stuff about different races come from? Well, it all comes from back in the beginnings of the 1900s, of the 19th century, the 1800s, along with so many other things that got started then. This idea of there being different qualities, different sections of humanity, was popularized by a man named Arthur de Gobineau. Arthur de Gobineau. And just to read some from his Wikipedia to you. I'll put it up there, just make it easy to share if you want to read along. Okay. Joseph Arthur de Gobineau, July 14th, 1816. Interesting, he was born on Bastille Day. Wow, must be a special guy. To 1882, was a French aristocrat. Okay, let's note that. who is best known for helping to legitimize racism by the use of the scientific racist theory and racial demography, and for developing the theory of the Aryan master race. Known to his contemporaries as a novelist, a diplomat, and a travel writer, he was an elitist who, in the immediate aftermath of the revolutions of 1848, wrote an essay on the inequality of the human races. In it, he argued that aristocrats were superior to commoners, and that aristocrats possessed more Aryan genetic traits because of less interbreeding with inferior races. Gobineau's writings were quickly praised by white supremacist pro-slavery Americans like Josiah Nott and Henry Hotza, who translated the book into English. They omitted about 1,000 pages of the original book, including those parts that negatively described Americans as a racially mixed population. Inspiring a social movement in Germany named Gobinism, his works were also influential on prominent anti-Semites such as Richard Wagner, Wagner's son-in-law Houston Stewart Chamberlain, the Romanian politician A.C. Cuza, and leaders of the Nazi Party, who later edited and republished his work. Gobineau came from an old and well-established aristocratic family. His father, Louis de Gobineau, was a military officer and staunch royalist. His mother, Anne-Louise Magdeleine de Guercy, was the daughter of a non-noble royal tax official. The de Guercy family lived in the French crown colony of Saint-Domingue, modern Haiti, for a time in the 18th century. Gobineau always feared he might have black ancestors on his mother's side. Oh my God. By the way, have you noticed a little bit of interesting characteristics of J. Edgar Hoover? There is a whole line of thought that he had actual black ancestry as well. I haven't chased that down, but just a side note. Reflecting his hatred of the French Revolution, Gobineau wrote, "My birthday is July 14th, the day on which the Bastille was captured, which goes to prove how opposites may come together." He's saying he's reconciled with the people who rebelled. As a boy and young man, Gobineau loved the Middle Ages, which he saw as a golden age of chivalry and knighthood, much preferable to his own time. Is that not what they want? They want to go back to the Middle Ages when they, the aristocrats, could just basically order everybody else around and say, you go, you pick up that and carry it over there, and you send me your daughter tonight. Well, there's an entire history of him, connection to the French East India Company and Louis XIV. The point is that this man was the beginning of the idea that not only are aristocrats better than everybody else, but they're actually a different race. Now, one of the things that troubles me the most is when you see things like in Australia that the native peoples that we have traditionally referred to as Aborigines. I don't I don't know if that's politically correct or not, but you know who I'm talking about, the very dark-skinned people of Australia that have been, driven off their land and corralled and uh, really mistreated for 300 years now. But those that are left and are surviving are, if they don't take the JAB, they're getting herded into camps. They start with the weak ones. They start with the ones that they think are lesser. Is this not exactly what the Nazis would do? Okay, I'm going to read some now. I will highlight the ways that Nazi racial thought was shaped by Darwinism, defined as biological evolution through the process of natural selection. First, almost all Nazi racial theorists believed that humans had evolved from primates. Second, they believed evolutionary explanations for the development of different human races, including the Nordic or Aryan race. Specifically, they believed that the Nordic race had become superior because harsh climate conditions in north central Europe during the Ice Ages had sharpened the struggle for existence, causing the weak to perish and leaving only the most vigorous. Third, they believed that the differential evolutionary development of the races provided scientific evidence for racial inequality. Fourth, they held that the different and unequal human races were locked in an ineluctable struggle for existence. Okay? So we're struggling. We, the superior ones, are struggling against the other races. So if you get an opportunity to, you know, find, fix, and finish these inferior races, why not? Just corral them into a containment facility, a concentration camp, and sooner or later, if you don't kill them yourself, they'll just die out. And don't feed them very well. It won't take long. Now, here's where it gets interesting as regards to the science. Indeed, the Nazi embrace of Darwinism in their racial ideology demonstrates the influence of science on Nazi ideology. Nazi racial ideology was largely consistent with the scholarship on race taught at German universities. It's taught in the university. If you are a student, you absorb it. If you are of a certain generation, you went to school during that era, or at least the people that uh, lived up until recently. Or perhaps you just were born afterward, but still absorbing it from teachers who were indoctrinated under the Nazi regime. But this kind of thinking is very subtle. You don't go around saying, "Hey, I believe that there are five races of humanity, and I'm on the best one, and I'm going to kill all the rest of them." No, you can't say that. But it's there. It's under the breath. It's there. This makes it even clearer why so many German anthropologists and biologists supported Nazi racism. They were already committed to it before the Nazis came to power. This is the lesson of The Guarded Gate by Daniel Okrent, which I read on my show. I don't know if it's still up on YouTube or not, but it's a more recent book about 3 years ago. It's a great summary of the beginning and the story of eugenics. Where does it come from? It comes from Rockefeller medicine. It comes from the elites of Boston, like Henry Cabot Lodge. It comes from the idea that all of these inferior people that are showing up on my streets can't possibly be the same race that I am because they're just too dirty. They're too scrawny. They're too ignorant. They're too different. I hasten to say that, we know much better now. We know better. We know there's only one race. The human race has not been divided into subraces. Science, yes, science has proven that. We know from extremely detailed studies that there is no genetic marker for race. There isn't one. But what you can do is you can identify generally where people come from certain genetic characteristics. So if you're able to say, well, this person probably came from um, sub-Saharan Africa because of the genetic characteristics that have arisen due to their environment, and then you realize that everybody in sub-Saharan Africa is probably black, then yeah, you can design something to hurt people based on their so-called race. It's not race, it's the color of their skin. This color of their skin is a product of their genes. The genes are the product of their environment and not the product of different classes of humanity that developed in different ways. There's no indication whatsoever anywhere that intelligence or creativity, tendency to be good or bad or anything, any of these characteristics have anything to do with genetics. But by studying the genetics, you can find a way to address things to people that come from a certain environment. You can identify Chinese people, not because they're a different race, but because of the genetic markers that arise due to their having lived in China. That's the most closest they can get. And I don't think they'll ever get any closer because we all have common ancestors. And I've shown that on my show by showing the very interesting work of a person who goes on YouTube under the name Useful Charts. So, yeah, we're all descended from Charlemagne, in other words. Many historians mention the Nazi embrace of social Darwinism, but they do not explore the scientific underpinnings of it. Paul Weindling points out that historians have been loath to engage with the biological sciences. Historians of Nazi Germany have curiously not seen race within a scientific framework. The biology of race remains relatively unexamined, quote unquote. This may seem odd in light of a spate of recent works arguing for the primacy of biology and race in the Nazi worldview. However, even if Weinling is overstating the case, he's largely correct. The study of Nazi racial ideology and of German biologists under the Nazi regime have not connected sufficiently. One reason some historians have erred is because of a mistaken belief that the Nazi insistence on hard heredity entailed a rejection of evolution. Hard heredity is a term of art. We have to catch on to the meaning of this. Hard heredity, the idea championed by German biologist August Weismann, is the idea that environmental influences cannot affect hereditary traits. Okay, this is very important. Nazi medicine believed in hard heredity. Hard heredity means that your genetic makeup is going to be passed on through your genes uh, to your progeny, and nothing during your life that happens is going to change, is going to alter the genetic material that gets passed on. So that idea of hard heredity ties into the idea that no, you shouldn't mix the races, okay? Because once you're fixed into the Aryan race, your genes are fixed and you shouldn't and can't, without hurting the race, mix with lesser genetic material. Weismann rejected the Lamarckian idea That's Lamarck, Lamarckian, idea that organisms can evolve by passing on acquired characteristics to their progeny. See how important this is? If during my life I have an experience that I learn something from, or perhaps I get my finger burned, or something happens that's traumatic and I have a psychological scar, is that passed on? Is that somehow through genetic material passed on? Well, we really don't know the answer yet. It's one of those things that needs some more science applied to it. There are arguments on both sides. But clearly, to me, to reject the idea that our environment and our interactions with other people and our life can't be something that alters our genetic information that we pass on doesn't seem right. It seems like evolution should go on even on an individual level if it exists at all. It's just my thinking. When the Nazis occasionally claimed that the Nordic race had been unchanged for thousands of years, they were not claiming that it had been immutable over geologic time. Even though racial traits do not change over historical time, selection and elimination do alter racial traits. That is something that they say happened 20 to 30,000 years ago when the superior Nordic Aryan race emerged due to their living in the difficult climate there with the ice and the snow and the cold winds blowing. Another reason some historians have erred is because they think the Nazis would have rejected a common ancestor for the various human races, because a common ancestor would imply human equality. Most German Darwinists emphasized racial variation and equality, not racial and inequality, not racial equality. Haeckel and many other Darwinists saw evolution as evidence against human equality, not supporting it. Nazi racial theorists believed that the Nordic race had diverged from other races far enough in the past that it had diverged considerably from other races. They also explained that natural selection was the process driving the evolution of the allegedly superior Nordic race. Nazi racial ideology was not derived exclusively from Darwinism. Gobineau, who wrote before Darwin published Origin of the Species, contributed the idea that the Aryan race was superior to all other races. He also claimed that racial mixing produced deleterious effects, leading many racial thinkers, including the Nazis, to oppose miscegenation. Hatred of the Jews had a long history predating Darwin and has nothing to do with Darwinism. Also, Mendelian genetics played a role in debates over racial ideology, especially about policy relating to miscegenation. Of course, that's the word for marriage between races within the Nazi regime. The leading anthropologist Eugen Fischer and the geneticist Fritz Lenz, these are both very famous scientists, both influential figures in racial science during the Nazi period, embraced both Gobineau and Darwinism. Some leading anti-Semitic thinkers in the early 20th century Germany, such as Fritsch and Henschel, incorporated Darwinism into anti-Semitic ideology. Thus, many Nazi racial theorists interpreted the opposition between the Nordic and Jewish race as an episode in the Darwinian struggle for existence. Well, we heard what Hitler had to say about it last night, so I'm going to skip those paragraphs. Um, Darwinism was in the Nazi biology curriculum, as we've already said, so I won't go through that too. Just scrolling through to make sure I didn't miss any of the things I wanted to cover. Germany's leading anthropologists in the Third Reich, including those in the SS, were uniformly Darwinian in their approach to the evolution of humans and races. The Nazi regime not only appointed many of these anthropologists to professorships, but recruited them to lecture to Nazi organizations and promoted their publications. The Nazi regime promoted the work of Hans Weinert, a prominent evolutionary anthropologist who joined the SS. He worked at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Genetics, and Eugenics until 1935, when the Nazi regime appointed him professor of anthropology at the University of Kiel. Weinert published many books and articles. In Die Rassen der Menschheit, The Races of Man, he explained the importance of evolution for anthropology. Anthropology, however, is the history of all humanity, beginning with its origin from the anthropoid ape ancestors and continuing to the dividing and remixing of all contemporary human races. He later claimed that the Nordic race had evolved to a higher level than the other races, especially the Australian Aborigines, whom he considered the lowest race. This evolution of races occurred because some races were eradicated or eclipsed by other races that were better adapted. The anthropologist most influential on Nazi ideology was Hans Günther, who was not trained as a professional anthropologist, but became famous for his books on racial anthropology. Shortly after Hitler came to power, Günther expressed approval of Nazi eugenics policies in a lecture on the role of heredity and selection in the state. He claimed that Darwin was a crucial influence on the development of modern scientific conceptions of heredity and selection, in part by supplanting Lamarckism. The state, he argued, needed to found its policies on the firm Darwinian basis of selection rather than the Lamarckian teaching of environmental influence. He stated, the only way to our goal is the Darwinian way, that is, selection and elimination, the hereditarily valuable having many children, and the hereditarily inferior having few or no children. Another important official Nazi Party publication, Nationalsozialistische Monatshefte, or the monthly notebook of National Socialism, edited by Alfred Rosenberg, and he's very important. He was the main theorist of political Nazism, occasionally featured articles promoting evolution. In addition to mentioning Haeckel's advocacy of eugenics and euthanasia, Blücher highlighted Haeckel's role in promoting human evolution. Blücher reminded his readers that human evolution, by Haeckel's view, led him to reject human equality and socialism. Okay, forgive me, I'm just skipping through to the end to make sure I didn't miss something. Eugen Fischer, director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics, also published an article on human evolution in Schulz's journal. In his essay, The Origin of Human Races, Fischer states that races that faced squarely the pitiless struggle causing selection in harsher environments had bred the highest mental characteristics. This was true of the Nordic race in the harsh struggle for existence at the border of the Ice Age's glaciers. The authors then asserted that the three main human races, European, Mongolian, and Negro, were subspecies that branched off from a common ancestor 100,000 years ago. An SS training manual states the following: the theory of evolution, that is, the knowledge of the connection of all living things, places humans in the whole of nature and determines for us anew our attitude and the behavior toward the living world. This section explained that the evidence for evolution is overwhelming. Another class had a subsection on the struggle for existence, which taught that humans arose through the struggle for existence in the ice ages. SS training included significant doses of teaching about evolution and the evolutionary origins of human races. Another important pamphlet was called Wofür kämpfen wir, which means why do we fight? the, the same title that Eisenhower gave to his famous farewell speech. A work published in the German military, the Nazi commitment to higher evolution of humans is a major theme. The authors argued that the Nordic race was already the highest evolved race, but they aimed at improving the human species yet more. Quote, the means to produce this new human type, they averred, is the instruction managed in the spirit of the National Socialist worldview. The precondition for it is maintaining purity of blood and advancing the evolution of our blood through breeding. Whoever wrote this pamphlet stressed the importance of human evolution to Nazi racial ideology. Conclusion: the historical evidence is overwhelming that human evolution was an integral part of the Nazi racial ideology. It held a prominent place in the Nazi school curriculum and in training courses. Nazi officials and SS anthropologists agreed that humans, including the Nordic race, had evolved from primates. All the mentioned events in the origin of humans and the cultivation of its races can be explained genetically. Without the emergence of hereditary differences, without selection and elimination, it could never have come to the formation of highly evolved races and tribes able to accomplish the highest tasks, and never have come to a higher human culture. This knowledge obligates us to take up the task in conscious selection to provide for a racially fit, hereditarily healthy, culture creating people of the future, and thus for the preservation of everything that lifts the life of humans above that of the animals. This vision was shared by the Nazi regime, whose policies ultimately aimed at one supreme goal: improving the human species biologically, that is, advancing human evolution. And that's the conclusion reached by the author of this pamphlet called The Role of Darwinism in Nazi Racial Thought. Enkidu, you're here. I'm so glad to see you. I haven't seen you in months and months, and wish you very happy holiday season. And glad to have you part of the talk. Yeah, the German Nazis copied from the Cold Spring Harbor. We've studied that here on the channel, and you're absolutely right. Let me read what you say here. Today, the eugenic thugs regret to be Nazis, but actually they are, because Nazism means eugenics, and all we have now under the pretext of pandemic is the global implementation of eugenics. Well, you just said everything I was trying to say. That's my show. You just told me. You just took you just made my point in one sentence. But I do believe that by going through the essay that we just read, that we have a little more depth behind it when we say these things. This business of wanting to jab everybody on the planet is so reminiscent of that philosophy, the Nazi race philosophy. And that idea that by identifying all the genetic characteristics of every human that exists. They'll have the entire map of all possible human genetic possibilities, and then they will consider those little building blocks, those little Lego pieces, as their toys. And they will put together humans however they want to. They'll put together humans with blue eyes. They'll put together humans with red eyes. They'll put together humans with one half of their face white and the other half black. They'll put together humans that are incredibly smart, and they'll put together humans that can't remember one thing from a minute to the next minute because they've had their memory genes taken out. This kind of experimentation doubtless is going on already, in some underground facilities or in Antarctica or up in space, flying around the earth where nobody can see them and nobody can criticize them. The Nazis did not lose the war. The war is still on, and we're the ones that are losing. So that's my point. When you see great hospitals like Charité supporting the whole fraud, then you know they haven't changed. Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, the bones from last night's show, they're still there. They don't want you to know about it. If they changed, they'd be exhibiting those bones, saying, see what these horrible people did, and we're not like them, and we condemn them. But no, they just want to sweep it under the rug. They even burned up the bones and buried them where nobody will ever see them. And those bones are gone. And if they can find the rest of them and get rid of them without us knowing it, they will. But was it not under Eugen Fischer that those bones were buried back in the 30s at Rockefeller's Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology and Human Genetics? And Kidu, you can put links in. I prefer it if you put them in the comment section after the show's over, so it's easier to find them later. But absolutely love to get your links either way. And everybody else, Lloyd, D. Baker, C. Holman, Jason, John London. That's an interesting point. I'm sure that nationalist socialists are against what liberals are doing with these lockdowns and police state control we now live under. I don't know about that, John. That's a good question. Um, Perhaps we'll put that on the agenda for another Mindfields. I don't know the bottom line, but from historical point of view, it certainly looks like this drive to improve humanity by humans manipulating human genetics is a completely Nazi program. And people that support that are wrong. They're deeply, deeply wrong. I'll see you guys tonight. Thanks again for being with me. Love you all. Happy holidays.